everyone, it's Danielle with Northlawn Flower Farms. Well, I'm really excited to shoot this video for you today because it's one that I really wish existed 7 years ago when I got started. And what we're going to be talking about today is sunflower successions, but I want to focus really heavily on this very first sunflower succession. Now, I've only been doing this very early spring planting of sunflowers for 2 years, and I want to give full credit to Lisa Mason-Ziegler over at the Gardener's Workshop for introducing me to this great method. I tried it, it works, and it gives me focal flowers the first and second week of June here in Zone 6B with an average last frost of April 23rd, when normally I would be struggling to have a focal flower. My peonies would be done, my ranunculus are getting too hot at that point, and my lilies are yet to bloom. But this first succession of sunflowers fills the gap and really continues to provide me with a focal flower for my stand. So let's just get started with how to go about doing this and when to start. It's not so much about your zone, but it's about your last expected frost date. My last expected frost, like I said, is April 23rd. So today is March 19th. I'm going to start a few flats of Pro-Cut Plum today. I'm going to start them inside on heat mats. As soon as they sprout, they'll go under lights. They'll live under those lights for about 2 weeks. At that point, I'll bring them outside to be hardened off for a week, and after that week, I'll plant them in a raised bed where I'll immediately hoop and row cover them for at least a week or two, depending on what the weather does. And what happened last year by following this exact method is that I was able to have sunflowers blooming the very first week of June. And when I think back to when I first started growing and selling cut flowers, I wasn't even seeding sunflowers until May. And now here it is, late March, and I'm seeding my first succession of sunflowers. But the really important thing to think about here is, do you have a place where you can plant this early succession of sunflowers and hoop and row cover them? Because that's going to be really crucial to their success. So I think one important thing to think about is, do you have a place in your garden where you can try the sunflower experiment out, where you can use hoops and row cover? Maybe you plant them in a traditional row, maybe you do it in a raised bed like I do, but perhaps doing this in the landscape might be a bit challenging unless you are able to cover them somehow for those first 2 weeks out. So now let's talk a little bit about varieties. Remember, these sunflowers, at least for me, are going to be blooming the very first into the second week of June. So I'm really looking for nice pastel colors, lighter colors, or more complementary colors to my cool flowers, which are blues and pinks and whites and peaches. So last year I grew 4 different varieties for this very first planting. I did Pro-Cut Plum, Pro-Cut White Light, Pro-Cut Green Fill, and Purple Fill. But the only one I'm growing this year, and I'm just going to grow more of them rather than, mix it up over multiple varieties, is Pro-Cut Plum. I loved that one. It performed beautifully. It paired beautifully with everything else I grow during that time of year. And even though I really love the look of White Light, I just have a really hard time keeping lighter colored flowers healthy and clean of bugs all throughout the year. It's always been a problem for me to keep things like white flowers looking great. So all that to say, when my white lights were budded up and just about to start opening those first few layers of petals, which is when I would normally want to pick them, there was some kind of a bug that always came in and messed up the petals. And so I was really having to pick them in very tight bud. And here at my flower stand, I like to pick things a little bit more open than you would normally pick for a florist, just so that my customer can really know and see what they're getting. And so what I was having to do is actually put baggies, like you would a dahlia, over all these white light sunflowers. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't working. It wasn't happening to my Pro-Cut Plums. And so this year, I'm just sticking with the Pro-Cut Plums. And I'm really interested to see what your thoughts are on the Sunfill Purple and the Sunfill Green, because some people seem to absolutely love them, and because of these people's passion, I went ahead and planted a tray of each. And maybe it was just me, but I really couldn't seem to get them to work. And since I have so much forsythia here to work with on the property as an absolutely free foliage plant, I didn't really find the Sunfield Purple or Green necessary or as beneficial as if I would have just planted Pro-Cut Plum. Now, of course, everyone is in a uniquely different situation, and what works best for me might not be the right thing for you. But I really feel like the Pro-Cut Plum is wonderful early in the season. And then as we go through the season, I'll come on into the bright yellows, the oranges, the rusts, the reds, and then those really dark chocolate sunflowers. So I hope that helps you out, but definitely plant whatever sunflower is going to be best for your particular situation. So with that being said, let's go ahead and seed a tray together. I always sow 2 trays, so it's just slightly less than 100 sunflowers. Of course, depending on what size property you're working with, you might be planting 1,000, but I do this every 2 weeks. If I had a larger property and if I wasn't growing so many bulbs, I probably would do it once every week. Henceforth, I'm also going to provide a link in the description section to the webinar that I first listened to that Lisa did. I'm not sure if it was in 2019 or 2020. But she said some really great things in there, and one that really stuck with me. She said that she was walking around her garden before it was the last frost and just noticing that she had sunflower seedlings around her farm. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I've noticed that same thing also. You know, it'll be early April, maybe to mid-April, and I'll just see sunflowers popping up and handling that very last frost. You know, maybe it goes down to 30 and they're fine out there, but essentially they're germinating in very early April here. And what we're always trying to do, right, is kind of replicate what nature does naturally, just to provide what these plants naturally want in their natural environment. Oh, hold that back. Gracie is alerting me to something. So I thought that was just a really great observation and a great way to also think about cool flowers, which I talk about so much. You know, if you've grown a lot of these cool flowers before in the landscape, you're probably noticing that they just naturally shed their seed in the fall and that they naturally germinate in the fall and then take off in the spring. And when we're doing this on a larger scale for the purpose of cutting and selling, we're just kind of trying to replicate what nature is doing naturally. So I thought that was just a really awesome observation that she had and was willing to share with everyone. So I'm just using professional grade potting soil for this. I use potting soil for all my seed starting. I noticed that's a common question. Another question I've got is about fertilizing seedlings. I don't do that. I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong. It's just not something that I've ever done. But certainly do whatever works best for you. And you know, isn't it just great fun to be back out here in the garden, enjoying some sunshine, enjoying hearing the birds are singing. Do the birds sing louder in the spring? Is that a real thing? Because it really seems like it. One other thing is if you're looking for a good source for Pro-Cuts, where I buy mine is either Johnny's, Sunflower Selections, or Lisa over at the Gardener's Workshop does sell them also. I'm pretty sure that Sunflower Selections is kind of the breeder of Pro-Cuts. I'm pretty sure I always get the best price from them, but I usually just look around. Also, sometimes if I need to push my Johnny's order up to the point where I get free shipping, I'll order from them. But there are multiple places where you can get Pro-Cuts. And in case you're not familiar with Pro-Cuts, these are sunflowers that are pollenless, they're single stem, and they were really bred for cut flower production. So now that these are in their cells, let me grab my watering can and we'll give them a good water. So now that these are all watered in, I'll take them inside and put them on a heat mat. As soon as they sprout, I'll put them under my lighting system, keep the lights 2 to 3 inches away from the top of the plant at all times. After 2 to 3 weeks, I'll move them outside, I'll harden them off for a week, and then I'll plant them back out there in my raised bed just like last year, which should land us at about the first week of April, probably the end of that week. But guys, I really hope this was helpful. Definitely give it a try. Just count back 6 weeks from your last expected frost and get started around that time. And remember, it's really best to do this experiment if you have the ability to hoop and row cover the planting area. Let me know if you have any questions, and of course, happy gardening. Bye.